Hello and welcome to Forward Boldly. I'm your host, Christine Niles. Luke 15:23-24 is the famous passage about the prodigal son. And here's the father talking about how he's going to celebrate now that his wayward son has come home. It says, quote, "Bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to make merry. A remarkable story about a real-life prodigal son, Jacques Fesch, a Frenchman who was executed, the very last man to be executed by guillotine in France. And he's very likely a saint right now in heaven. I want to get into his remarkable story in this episode of Forward Boldly. You're not going to want to miss it because it really is an amazing and very inspiring tale about this man. As a reminder for those interested in buying or selling a home, please consider realestateforlife.org. They will pair you with a faith-based realtor who shares your values. They'll get an excellent price for you. And the best part about it is they'll give a cut of their commission to the pro-life charity of your choice. I have used them twice, both to buy and to sell a home. I was very pleased in both circumstances. I know friends who've used them as well, and they were also very happy with the entire experience. And the best thing is it's not going to cost you a single penny. So to learn more, just go to realestateforlife.org. That is realestateforlife.org. On February 24th, 1954, in the course of a robbery gone wrong, a man named Jacques Fesch killed a policeman and he wounded 3 others as he was fleeing the scene. 3 years later, on October 1st, the feast of Saint Therese of Lisieux, Jacques Fesch was executed by guillotine, had his head cut off. Let's go a little bit into the background of Jacques' life. He was born into a wealthy family in France. His father was a successful banker from Belgium, but his father was an artist and an atheist, and he had very little to do with his children. Apparently, Jacques had a terrible home life. The father and the mother fought constantly. Father was dictatorial, authoritarian, cold, harsh, could be charming to outsiders, but cruel to his own family. And Jacques' mother was a defeated and very depressed woman. So Jacques had an extremely unhappy home life and loveless marriage, all of that. Now, the mother did try to raise her son as a Catholic, but in school, he started to abandon his faith, got into a lot of trouble, eventually expelled from a Jesuit school. His own parents divorced when he was 17, and from that moment on, he just went downhill. He started associating with the wrong people, started partying, drinking, carousing, and by the age of 21, he had gotten his girlfriend Pierrette pregnant. They entered into a civil marriage, not a Catholic marriage, but a civil marriage, so it actually remained, a fornicating union, not recognized by the church. He actually described his childhood this way in one of his writings. He said, "It was as though I grew up in a stable." Stable, of course, is where you keep animals. So that tells you what he thought about his upbringing. So his father offered him a position at his bank. Jacques went ahead and took it, but he was not very reliable and did really nothing meaningful with the rest of his time. Like I said, partying, carousing, drinking, get his girlfriend pregnant. And then he ended up also having an affair with another woman and fathering a child through his mistress. That was at the age of 24 years old. And he was just absolutely miserable. Miserable. He had a daughter with his wife and a son, illegitimate son, with the mistress. And further sank into despair, atheism, lost his faith. And then one day he saw a sailboat. And he seized upon this dream of sailing around the Galapagos Islands towards Polynesia, sailing to Tahiti and spending the rest of his days in Tahiti so that he could escape all of his current woes. He became obsessed with this dream. He thought, I need to get on a boat. I just need to sail to Tahiti and all my problems will vanish. And so he went to his father in order to get money to buy a boat. His father refused, shattering his dream. But Jacques refused to give up. So what he decided to do is one day, absolutely desperate to escape his miserable life, he got a gun and he went to his father's friend, who was a money dealer, attempting to steal money from his father's friend. The father's friend was Alexander Silberstein, and Fesch hit him over the head, but Silberstein still managed to sound the alarm. The police come, And as Jacques is running away from the police, he turns around, fires some shots, and he kills the policeman whose name was Jean Verne. He also wounded 3 others with the gunshots as he's trying to escape into the metro. But he's apprehended and taken in and brought into prison, jail, and then they have this big sensational trial. And headlines explode all over French media about this trial. Everybody's glued to the papers, glued to the TV screens, watching as this trial unfolds. And it's a very soap opera sort of atmosphere. Meanwhile, Jacques himself is still an incredibly angry and bitter atheist while he's there languishing in jail. And on April 6, 1957, Fesch was condemned to death by the guillotine. So he spent several years actually in solitary confinement in La Santé prison in Paris. And there was a Dominican prison chaplain who tried to reach out to him. And initially, Jacques rebuffed all of his attempts. He just didn't want anything to do with the Catholic faith, nothing to do with his priest. And every time the Dominican priest would try to talk to him, Jacques said, "Go away. I want nothing to do with you." We'll be right back with the show, but I'd like to take a moment to encourage you to sign up for a premium subscription if you haven't already. It's only $10 a month, which is a really rock bottom price, and it gets you thousands of hours of content on everything across the board: theology, philosophy, apologetics, history, everything. We have things for little children. We have things for adults. While we give a lot of our content away for free, the work that we do here does not come for free. It costs us money. The $10 a month will go a long way in helping us to continue to produce top quality, faith-based content, all with a view towards spreading truth, ultimately for the salvation of souls. So if you want to support us, please consider signing up for premium at churchmilitant.com/go premium. That's churchmilitant.com/go premium. Thank you so much for your support. But the chaplain kept trying. He kept praying. He kept trying. And eventually, he gained the trust of Jacques and the Dominican prison chaplain became friends. It also happened that an old friend of Jacques became a priest. And he would come and visit Jacques in prison and talk to him about the Catholic faith. And then the third person in the triumvirate that tried to influence him in the Catholic faith was Jacques' own attorney. Jacques' own lawyer was a devout Catholic. And so he would also speak to Jacques about the Catholic faith. And all 3 of them exerted a good influence on him with regard to the practice of the faith. And it was then that Jacques began to really examine his life, to do self-examination, to do a gut check and look at his life and realize all the ways in which he had messed up his own life and that he had no one to blame but himself. And his own mother returned to the practice of the faith. And one day she left him a book on Our Lady, and he read through that book. And by the end of the book, he was absolutely thunderstruck with contrition, realizing the horrors that he had committed in his life and all the sins that he had done. And in a February 28th, 1955 diary entry, he described his conversion experience. "I met the one who waits unwearyingly for the wounded and desperate soul, who was watching for my arrival as I come staggering under the weight of my cross. The Spirit of the Lord seized me by the throat. Within the space of a few hours, I came into possession of faith with absolute certainty. I believed grace came over me. A great joy flooded my soul, and above all, a deep peace." And it was immediately after that he asked for the prison chaplain so he could make his first confession in many, many years. And from that moment, he truly changed. Instead of seeing his prison cell as a horrible torture chamber, he treated it as a monastic cell. He treated it as a cloister. He even joked in one of his letters that his life in his little cell was not very different from that of a Carthusian monk. And he would start his day reading the words of Mass from the Missal, reading the Bible, and reading spiritual biographies of saints like Francis of Assisi, St. Therese of Lisieux, St. Teresa of Avila, and others. These were books that were brought to him by his Catholic friends, the lawyer, the prison chaplain, also the books by his mother. And he was in frequent touch with all of his family, but especially lots of letters to his brother and his stepmother. And he tried to reconcile with his wife and encourage her to practice the faith. He also, it's their conflicting accounts, but it seems he may have also attempted a Catholic marriage to his wife to rectify the civil union that they joined in before. It's not clear whether or not they actually completed that religious ceremony, but there are conflicting accounts that they did attempt a Catholic marriage while he was in prison. And one of the devastating blows that he was struck while he was waiting trial was that his mother died. But fortunately, she died, reconciled to God and practicing the faith. As I mentioned, he did keep a spiritual journal. He wrote many, many letters. And in jail, he developed a deep devotion to Our Lady. And this is one of the things that he wrote. I pray above all to the Blessed Virgin Mary. When I feel alone, I need only take refuge in her. She guards and consoles me like a little child. And this is what Protestants don't understand. I sympathize because I was a Protestant once, and I also didn't understand why Catholics turn to Our Lady. I remember looking in puzzlement and bewilderment when I would ask Catholics, well, why do you have devotion to Mary? And they would come back and they'd say, oh, she's such a tender, loving mother. I feel so close to her. And I couldn't understand that. I couldn't relate to that at all. I just didn't understand it. Now, of course, I understand it 100%. I understand it completely. But it took a while for me to grasp the role of Our Lady in the Catholic faith, the very essential and necessary role of Our Lady, the healing, consoling, uplifting role of Our Lady, who always points us to Jesus. It's never about herself, ever. That would be sacrilegious. That would be blasphemous because she's not God. She's not divine at all. She always points us to Jesus and brings us closer to her Son. That is her purpose. Also in jail, in prison, Jacques pondered and contemplated the role of suffering. So he, in a sense, really became a mystic. He said, quote, how many souls have been changed in concentration camps or on battlefields? So he was thinking about the role of suffering in people's lives and the way that it can actually draw us closer to God and can even be the means of our salvation. That's something that we can forget when we're in the midst of suffering, that in some cases it is a severe mercy. And God is a loving Father. He never wants to inflict punishment on us. He takes no delight and no joy in inflicting punishment on his children. Just like any good parent on earth never enjoys punishing their children. It can even cause them pain. But they know in some cases it's necessary in order to teach their children a necessary lesson to protect them from the same wrongdoing in the future. So Archbishop Fulton Sheen once said, sometimes God has to break hearts in order to get into them. Sometimes our hearts are so hardened and we don't listen to the voice of God and we are on the wrong track. And he has done everything and we're still not listening. Sometimes he's got to break our hearts to get into them. He doesn't want to do it, but sometimes that's what it takes. I hope you're enjoying the show. The rest of the show is behind the paywall, so please go to churchmilitant.com to watch the rest. For those who are not premium subscribers, you can sign up at churchmilitant.com/go premium. See you there.